ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। So as you know, we'll be continuing our discussion of the great person who is known as the founder of Western philosophy. So just a recapitulation of what we discussed last time. 2400 years ago, one man tried to discover the meaning of life. His search was so radical, charismatic, and counterintuitive that he became famous throughout the Mediterranean. He charmed a whole city. Soldiers, merchants, aristocrats, all would come to listen. As Cicero eloquently put it, he brought philosophy down from the skies. So, Socrates was among the first moral philosophers, and we have seen that we have discussed a little about his life and appearance. He was not at all handsome to look at, but extremely skilled in poetry, music, and athletics. And he was strange in many ways. We have seen first of appearance, and secondly, the values he cherished. When the whole world is going mad for name, fame, wealth, honors, political power, here was one man who did not care anything for all those things. And about his lifestyle and appearance, we have seen last time, but I found some new passages, so I will quote those. How the master lived, hardly anybody knew. Means how he lived, nobody knew. Because he never worked. And he took no thought of the morrow. Morrow means tomorrow. I have to save so much. After 10 years, I will do this. Nothing of that sort. He ate when his disciples asked him to honor their tables, and they must have liked his company, for he gave every indication of physiological prosperity. This means that he was a little stout. Then we have, as you know, the two sources of Socrates' main are Plato and Xenophon. So they agree when they describe his habits and characters. He was content with one simple and shabby robe throughout the year and liked bare feet than sandals or shoes. He was incredibly free from the acquisitive fever that agitates mankind. See the language. Just he could have said that he did not accumulate, but how he has put it. He was free from the acquisitive fever that agitates mankind. Viewing the multitude of articles exposed for sale in the marketplace, he remarked, "How many things there are that I do not want." So, but he was very rich in his poverty, and he was a model of moderation and self control. But he was no recluse, he liked good company, and also he let the rich entertain him now and then, but he made no obeisance to them. Hmm. And he could get very well along without them also. And he rejected the gifts and invitation of, either very, very rich people or even kings. Hmm. So all in all, he was fortunate. Now see the language, Will Durant. He lived without working, read without writing, taught without routine, drank without dizziness, and died before senility. Before he grew very old, he died. And like his appearance, strange was his way of teaching also, because we have seen that he adamantly insisted that he was not a teacher. This means he did not give something new of his own to the students, he just made them think for themselves. So, his teaching, the examples of his teaching are the Socratic dialogues, in which Socrates, by means of a kind of interrogation, tries to find out more about other people's understanding of moral issues. And we have seen that many youths flocked about him and helped him to create European philosophy. Why did the pupils revere him so much? Perhaps because they liked best in him the modesty of his wisdom. He did not claim to have wisdom. He said, I also seek wisdom like all of you, so I am one of you. Hmm. So interesting thing about this humility of his, in the apology. So you now we have to get familiar with these books. Apology, and other books written by Plato, but they are supposed to contain the teachings of Socrates. So the Apology written by Plato is a Socratic dialogue. What does it contain? It contains the speech of self-defense which Socrates gave when he was tried in the court for impiety and corruption. So the work Apology is supposed to contain the whole transcript of that proceedings, and Socrates' speech is there. So now in the Apology, Socrates describes an event that helped to shape his approach to philosophy. One of his friends went to the shrine of Apollo at Delphi and asked the priestess of the shrine. Those priestesses were supposed to be all knowing and have some special powers and all. So that friend of Socrates asked her whether there was anyone wiser than Socrates. Hmm. So the priestess, supposed to be the mouthpiece of the god Apollo, she said there is no one wiser than Socrates. Now, so this reached Socrates, this, the great compliment which the goddess is supposed to have given him. So when Socrates heard this, he said, no, it can't be. I am certainly not the wisest, and I will prove it to the goddess, prove it to the priestess. So now Socrates set out to prove the priestess wrong. And he began to question everybody in Athens who had a reputation for wisdom. All politicians, poets, artisans, scholars, etc. But what he discovered was that although those individuals claimed to have wisdom, but actually they possessed very little of it. So then Socrates concluded that maybe the goddess was right. He was much wiser than his fellow citizens because he at least knew that he was ignorant. So, this is a very interesting year. So, of course, we all know, we have studied the pre-Socratic philosophers, so we all know that before him also there had been philosophers, Pythagoras and all these famous people. But for the most part, they had been physical philosophers. They had sought for the nature of external things, the laws and constituents of the material and measurable world. Socrates says, okay, that is good. There is no harm in it. We have to know about the world. But there is an infinitely worthier subject for philosophers than all these trees and stones and planets and inanimate objects. What is that? That is the mind of man. What is man? And what can he become? So, in the agora, he used to wander about, catch any unsuspecting person. Hmm. And as Will Durant puts it, he went about prying into the human soul. Hmm. Just see the language. He went about prying into the human soul, uncovering assumptions and questioning certainties. See language. Hmm. We assume so many things, but we don't know. So he uncovered all those. And we are certain about so many things, but we don't know why. So uncovering assumptions and questioning certainties. If men discourse too readily of justice, he asked them quietly, what is it? What do you mean by these abstract words which you so easily use, with which you so easily settle the problems of life and death? What do you mean by honor, virtue, morality, patriotism? What do you mean by yourself? So it was with such moral and psychological questions that Socrates loved to deal. Hmm. So some poor people who suffered at the hands of Socrates, who came to know that they knew nothing. Hmm. So they objected. What? That he asked more than he answered. And he left men's minds more confused than ever before. Nevertheless, he bequeaths to philosophy two very definite answers to two of our most difficult problems. What? What is the meaning of virtue? And what is the best state? See, here state does not mean the state in which we live. Here state means government, city state, you know. So we have to always remember these particular usages. Again, we will later see also that democracy and aristocracy, the usages in Greek, ancient Greek were very different from in the sense we use them. So we have to remember these. So best state means best form of government. Who are the best people to rule and make decisions for the city, state or the country. So now let us go into some detail. Let us examine the teachings of Socrates in detail. First of all, in detail means as much detail we can go into within this short time. It's a huge thing, Socratic dialogues. So what is the source? That is the first thing. So one work of Plato I have mentioned, that is Apology. And his best known work is the Republic. The Republic is also Socratic dialogue which Plato wrote in about 375 BC concerning justice, the order and character of the just city-state, and the just man. So if the state has to be just, what should it be like? If a human being has to be just, what should his character be? So this is Plato's best known work, The Republic. And it is one of the world's most influential works of philosophy and political theory, both intellectually and historically. So in the dialogue which this book contains, Socrates discusses the meaning of justice and whether the just man is happier than the unjust man. He considers the nature of existing regimes and then proposes a series of hypothetical cities in comparison. So, what is our state? and what is the ideal state. Hmm. So when we compare only, we can know the shortcomings and how we can improve. So he proposed a series of hypothetical cities in comparison, culminating in what is a utopian city, means the perfect city state. Hmm. How it should be like. So all these are given in the Republic. And he also discussed aging, love, theory of forms, the immortality of the soul, and the role of the philosopher and poetry in society. So everything is there in this work, Republic. Now, this is the source. And what is the speciality of his philosophy? We have already had a glimpse into that. So, Socrates was the first person, at least in the Western world, to give a practical and political focus to philosophy and ethics. See, stars, moons, astronomy, everything is all right. But if it doesn't affect your own life, hmm, like how many times the moon goes around the sun, it's okay, knowledge we should have. But how does it affect you actually, practically? Hmm. So he stressed on the practical aspect. What will be of use to you as human beings? Hmm. So he was the first person to give a practical and political focus to philosophy and ethics. What is ethics? Ethics are the norms by which acceptable and unacceptable behavior are measured. Whether you are ethical or unethical means what? Whether your behavior is acceptable or not acceptable. So, according to Socrates, one develops ethics through three things. First is maturity. One should be sufficiently mature to know what is good and what is good or bad. Secondly, through wisdom. We should have some knowledge. And third is love. So these are the three things required in a human being if he wants to be ethical. So before Socrates, philosophy had focused primarily on questions of metaphysics and science. Socrates was the first philosopher to assert that the human realm was the proper focus of philosophical inquiry. Because after all, man is concerned mostly with man. Human beings are concerned mostly with ourselves. So Socrates believed, to the contrary of many around him, that the most pertinent questions that philosophy had to deal with related to how people should live their lives. Not how many Milky Ways or how many galaxies or how many stars are there. So, what kinds of actions were righteous and how people should live together in communities and states. We know all about hundreds of planets, hundreds of galaxies, but we are fighting each other. So, what's the use? So, Socrates' focus on ethics was intended to generate practical outcome. How it will help us. He expected philosophical work might lead to a change both in attitudes and actions of people. What is our attitude towards others? Attitude towards the world, attitude towards ourselves. Those determine our actions. So when the attitudes are clear, our actions also be more rational. So philosophy therefore was for Socrates neither theology nor metaphysics nor physics nor astronomy, but ethics and politics, with logic as an introduction and means. So think logically. Coming at the close of the sophistic period, he perceived that the sophists had created one of the most critical situations in the history of culture. Before him, the sophists were there. He is also supposed to be a kind of sophist. So Socrates saw that because of the sophists, a peculiar situation had been created in Greece. What was that? The weakening of the supernatural basis of morals. I have to be moral. Why? If I don't become moral, gods will punish me. So once if I become convinced that nobody is going to punish me, then I can become immoral also. So Socrates found that this was not the proper way to make men moral. They should not be ruled by fear. So he moved forward to the profoundest question that ethics can ask. Is a natural ethic possible? Can morality survive without supernatural belief? Even if I don't believe in any supernatural being who will punish me, can I still be moral? Can philosophy, now just see the language. I want just please, I want your full attention. Hang on to every word. See this language. Can philosophy, by molding an effective, secure moral code, save the civilization which its freedom of thought has threatened to destroy? That was the state there. Freedom of thought means everyone is free to think in any way likes. So now there will be no moral code sometimes because everybody will think in a different way. There will be no uniform law of good and evil. So can philosophy then come to the help? Can philosophy, by molding an effective secular moral code which is free from all supernatural beliefs, can it save the civilization in which everybody has the right to think for himself? So this was his main question. So when Socrates argues that the good is not good because the gods approve of it, but that the gods approve of it because it is good. So we'll go very deep. So just each, because I've after reading so many things, I've tried to gather the cream. So each, please pay, if you want to enjoy, just please pay attention to each sentence. This language is beautiful. So now, before, as we have seen, Will Durant says that he gave the answer to the two most important questions: what is virtue, and which is the best state. So we will just have a glimpse into that. But before studying his teachings, we have to understand the meanings of some terms which are special. They have a special meaning. So first we have seen state. What does state mean? State means government or city-state. Okay. Now, when we study Socrates' conception of who is the perfect king, who is supposed to be the most fit to rule over us, he will mention the concept of philosopher king. So we have to understand what is the meaning of philosopher according to Socrates. Otherwise, we will not be able to appreciate what he says. And one another very special term used in Greek philosophy, we have to understand, that is forms. Forms. Forms, we mean any kind of form, but that is not the meaning here. So, what is that? First, let us try to understand the exact meaning of these two terms. First, forms. Second, philosopher, according to Socrates. So, forms we have to understand through an allegory which is related to Plato's theory of forms. So actually it is ascribed to Socrates, but since Plato has written, it is also known as Plato's theory of forms. Socrates is supposed to have said and Plato is supposed to have written. Now, see, according to this, forms and not the material world known to us through sensation possesses the highest and most fundamental kind of reality. I again repeat, not the material world which is known through us through sensations, what we see, what we hear, not that. But what is the highest and most fundamental kind of reality? It is forms, not the material world. This means what? Forms is separate from the material world. So we can equate it with the supreme reality which Indian philosophy talks so much about. Knowledge of the forms constitutes real knowledge, or what Socrates considers the good. See how close it comes to the Indian conception of the supreme reality. That there it is called the supreme good by Socrates, and we all, the Indian philosophers also say that supreme reality is supremely good. And we also say that the supreme reality is beyond this material world. Socrates says the same thing. And Socrates says that the most excellent people must follow the highest of all studies, which is to behold the good, the forms. So what does Eastern philosophy say? Same thing. That the most exalted persons should give up this materialistic world and try to behold, means try to experience that supreme good. See how easy it becomes to understand when we study both the philosophies, how easy it becomes to understand, to connect. Now, the allegory of Plato is an excellent way of understanding what this term, the forms, means and who is a philosopher. So it goes like this, very interesting. Imagine a group of people who have lived their entire lives as prisoners. Whole life they are in some cave, chained to a wall in the subterranean, so that they are unable to see outside. The world outside they don't know. Okay, now imagine that there is a flame which illuminates the various objects outside. So they cannot see outside clearly, but it is not completely dark in the cave. There is a flame which is illuminating some objects outside which they can see. And the shadows of those forms fall on the wall of the cave. So maybe some cat is going, so they will see the famed shadow of a cat on the wall of the cave. Now these prisoners, though having no other experience of reality, ascribe forms to these shadows, such as either dog or cat. They don't know actually what is outside. They've never been outside. But what happens when the shadow falls? There is some shape. So they give the name. Okay, this is a dog. This is a cat. But they've never seen that actually in life. Now, suppose someone manages to be freed from the cave and comes outside in the bright light of daytime, that is the bright light of knowledge. This person, according to Socrates, this person who is free now is a philosopher. This is the meaning of the term philosopher. We should always remember. Now, the prisoner, when he comes out, he is initially blinded by the light. All the, like when we, when we suddenly switch on the light after in a dark room, we are blinded by the light. But when he adjusts to the brightness outside, he sees everything. He sees the fire or the living beings or the statues, what caused the images which he witnessed inside the cave. Now he knows. He sees that the fire and the statues in the cave were just copies of the real objects. They were not the real thing. They were mere imitations. Now, what we see from day to day, these are all reflections. Reflections of what? Reflections of what is the reality lying behind them. Reflection of the forms in Greek philosophy. So we people who are still in the cave, who cannot see anything beyond, we are seeing only these reflections. Reflection of the form, but we are not seeing the forms themselves. We are not seeing the reality. But the philosopher who has come out, he will now not be deceived by shadows because he has seen the real thing. And hence, he will be able to see the real world. The world above these appearances. So, in Greek philosophy, this is mentioned like this. The philosopher will gain knowledge of things in themselves. This is a usage peculiar to this Greek philosophy. Things in themselves. We will say in West Eastern philosophy, we will say he will gain the knowledge of the supreme reality. It means the same thing. So after this allegory is mentioned, it is Socrates says, now that the philosopher has come outside, but it is his duty to go back into the cave. He says that those who have ascended to this highest level must not remain there, but they must return to the cave and stay with the prisoners as long as they can, because it is their duty to educate those who are still bound. So when Swami Vivekananda wanted to remain in Samadhi, what did Sri Ramakrishna say? You fellow, you are born to help others also. So now, this is the meaning of the term philosopher. And since the philosopher has reached this level, he has seen the forms and is not deceived by appearances. If he is not deceived by appearances, he will have no inclination for name, fame, riches, power, because he knows these are all appearances. Only that kind of philosopher is fit to rule the society. See how astounding it is. So, what does a philosopher realize? A philosopher recognizes that before philosophy, now see here philosophy does not mean just reading books. Here philosophy means beholding the good actually beholding. So, what does Swami Vivekananda say? Religion is realization. It is not getting by heart hundreds of books. So, a philosopher recognizes that before philosophy means before he had gained the knowledge of the good, his soul was a veritable prisoner. Now, see the language. His soul was a veritable prisoner, fast bound within his body. This means what? If we have to gain true knowledge, we have to go beyond this body. According to Socrates, also, we have to rise above the body. Till we identify ourselves with the body and desire the enjoyments which the body can give us, we cannot behold that good. We cannot become philosophers. So, all these are so fascinating, and you can understand this so much better when we can compare. So, here philosophy means the supreme knowledge of the good or of the forms, and the philosopher is not just a book learned man. According to Socrates, he is one who has realized, in our terminology, who has beheld this supreme good. So now we can go to Socrates' explanation of the two things which we had seen, most important things. In a very short form, we will discuss. What is that? What is virtue? And what is the perfect state? Means perfect government, perfect city state. So first, just in a capsule, what is virtue? Socrates advances two theories regarding virtue. The most important revolutionary statement of Socrates, we can tally it so well with Eastern philosophy. He suggests what? What is virtue? He says that virtue is a kind of knowledge. If a person says, I am virtuous, but he has no knowledge of this reality or whatever it is, then he can't be called virtuous in the real sense of the term, according to Socrates. So, virtue he equates with knowledge. Similar to the expertise involved in a craft. Suppose we learn something very well, we become expert. So, this means that knowledge, like knowledge can be learned. We can get expertise in something, no, if we learn, either carpenter or anything, what we want to become. So, if virtue is equated with knowledge, then if knowledge can be learned, virtue can also be learned. If it can be learned, virtue can also be taught. And he suggests 5 virtues, which according to him form a sort of unity. What are those? Wisdom first, temperance, courage, justice, and piety. So all these are so similar in every religion we can see. They're just the words are different, but they all mean the same thing. Wisdom, temperance, courage, justice, and piety. So what is virtue? Virtue is an expertise concerned with measuring the value of things. Measuring the value of things means not dollars and cents. Measuring their impact on one's life. Just see. When I am virtuous, according to Socrates, when can I be called virtuous? When my priorities are proper. This means what? I have a perfect knowledge of what thing will impact my life in what way. And I know that the most important thing should be given first preference. Then I know this is called in Sanskrit Viveka. Knowing what is really good for us. Yes, we have to do a job, we have to earn money, we have a family, we have a house, everything is okay. But in the list of priorities, where does it stand? Are they everything in the world? Is there nothing beyond them? A virtuous man, according to Socrates, will say no. These are just means to an end. But the real aim of life is to become a philosopher. Means to behold that reality which is beyond all forms. That is virtue according to Socrates. And from this it follows what Socrates says, that this expertise or this virtue is not separate from the process of disciplining our desires. Everything is connected. If our desires are absolutely uncontrolled, then we cannot be virtuous. Because then there is no hierarchy in our lives, no sets of priorities. We want everything and anything. Then we cannot be virtuous. Because we don't know. We don't know what thing has what impact on our lives. So, undisciplined desires lead to psychological deterioration, according to Socrates. Which means that the undisciplined person will eventually become psychologically incapable of developing the expertise for living a good and happy life. Each word, as I told you, please pay attention to each word. An undisciplined person will eventually become psychologically incapable of developing the expertise for living a good and happy life. He will not know how to do that. How is it different from what all these scriptures teach? Second is, he said that he also equated virtue not, he said that the life of virtue was always in a person's best interest also. Even if we want our own good, we have to be virtuous. He did not think that anyone could be happy in life who was not morally sound. This fundamental belief of his, he expressed quite clearly in the apology. Apology means his defense when he was tried. He said, when he was accused of, corrupting the youth and all that, he said, I do nothing but go about persuading you all, young and old alike, not to take thought for your bodies and properties, but first and chiefly to care about the greatest improvement of the soul. I tell you that virtue is not given by money, but that from virtue comes money and every other good of man. So, putting the cart before the horse is what we are doing. But here, like all the saints of East and West, Socrates says the same thing. The first thing is become a philosopher, then everything will be added unto you. Is this working, Sudhya? So now in the little time we have, we can see also what Socrates said about the perfect state, means perfect government. So we know that throughout the course of human history, people have repeatedly tried to create, the perfect government in which each citizen could be content with life, each will have equal rights and justice. Justice was the deciding factor on all things related to the common good. So this quest gave rise to questions of the forms of government. Which form is good for the whole of the population? And what the ideal state, ideal city state should be like. So Socrates points out, he was well aware of human character and human follies, human greed. So he points out the human tendency to be corrupted by power. And when this happens, it leads down the road to oligarchy. Oligarchy means the rule of a small band of rich people. Extremely rich, they control everything. They respect only money. So if they come to rule the state, then it will be only materialistic interest, that's all. So when there is corruption, it leads to oligarchy and also tyranny. Tyranny, we all know, where the whimsical desires of the ruler become the law. I say so, you have to do that. There is no rhyme or reason. So, when the whimsical desires of a tyrant become the law and there is no check upon any kind of arbitrariness, any rule he can make, anything he can do. Jews are bad, why? Because Hitler says so. So burn everything, kill all Jews, everything. No rhyme or reason. This kind of tyranny. So when there is corruption, it will lead to these two. From this, Socrates concludes that ruling a state can only be done by whom? Who cannot be corrupted. And who are the people who cannot be corrupted? According to him, only the philosophers. So they will be the most just because they have no selfish interest and therefore absolutely unsusceptible to any kind of corruption. So Socrates argues, in an ideal state, city state, a person who is highly educated, has passion for learning of all kinds, and most important, has achieved the understanding of the forms of the good. That is the supreme vision. Only he should govern. And this person is the philosopher king. Such fantastic thoughts, see. So according to him, the state, the government, the city, the kingdom can be good only if it is governed by philosopher kings. Unselfish people who rule not for their personal gratification but for the good of the city, for the good of the state, not for any selfish interest. So the philosophers know what is good and they also understand the corrupting effect of greed, and naturally they will not want to own anything. millions of dollars in the bank, huge properties, and etc. etc. They will have no selfish motive at all. So only the unselfish people can govern. So in the great master life of Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna himself says, as far as I remember, that Totapuri, his guru, who gave him that samadhi, he said that those people knew they had the vidya of transforming ordinary metal into gold. They knew how to do it. But that vidya was transferred only to the person who has had that highest realization. Because they knew that he will not misuse that. So something similar we find here also in the wonderful teachings of Socrates. So this is the more or less in this short time we have the gist of what Socrates said about these four things. First, what is the forms? What is the supreme good? Who is actually the philosopher? What is actually philosophy? And two most important things, what is virtue? So each sentence of what we had read about virtue is very, very important. And what is the perfect state means perfect city state, perfect government, and who is the best ruler. If this rule be followed, then the whole problems of all over the world will be solved. If in each country we have one God-realized person as the head, so, but that is a utopia. It can never happen. But that is the ideal, and that is why you will see that on all these religious organizations in the beginning, for some years in the beginning, they run in a perfect way. Why? Because those great souls are there, men of realization. After maybe 100, 200, 300 years, problems start entering because after they have gone away. So all the practical we know experience all points out how pregnant these teachings of Socrates given more than 2000 years ago, they are still so relevant. So now we have to end here. But before ending, I will show you a video which I just had some slides. So the most important, or you can say the most popular quotes of Socrates.